now get a wrap-up of the international news. Joy Sohaja is in London for Around the World in 5.
Good evening from London. Hundreds of passengers were stranded at Kenya's main airport following a strike by staff. Flights were grounded and there were severe delays as airline workers walked off the job. The Transport Secretary has described the action as economic sabotage. Danny Vucenovic reports.
There were screams as striking airline staff ran for safety, their peaceful protest ending abruptly as heavy-handed riot police moved in. The industrial action was triggered by a labour dispute. Members of the Aviation Workers Union concerned about contracts and job security with Kenya Airways. But protesters are also angry over a proposed takeover of the airport authority.
You can't allow a company like Kenya Airways that is collapsing to take over Kenya Airports Authority. Kenya Airports Authority makes around 11 billion a year. Kenya Airways loses 7 billion per year. How can a company losing 7 billion oversee another that's making between 10 and 11 billion per year?
The government condemned the strike as illegal and told those taking part they have no reason to complain.
You have been given assurances that the numbers are going up in terms of employment, and you still go on strike. That is called malice, it is called sabotage, it is called economic sabotage. It is something which cannot be tolerated.
Hundreds of passengers were stranded, resulting in queues at both the domestic and international terminals as flights were grounded, cancelled and delayed. It also meant missed connections for many.
We've lost a lot of money because, local flight in where we are going, once you miss the flight, you forget the money. So it's really bad for us.
I did not sleep all night. If they knew there was going to be a strike, they shouldn't have picked us from the hotel that early.
Air Force personnel were brought in to take over screening and security services in a bid to clear the backlog. Danny Vucenovic, Channels Television News.
Suicide bombers and gunmen have killed more than a dozen people in Afghanistan. They targeted a construction company in the city of Jalalabad. Local officials say 2 bombs were detonated outside the building before the gunmen opened fire. North Korea appears to be restoring part of a rocket test site after pledging to dismantle it. A new satellite image purportedly shows that a structure at the Sohae station has been rebuilt. Kim Jong-un had agreed to pull apart the facility during his first summit with President Trump. The US has warned that new sanctions could be introduced if Pyongyang doesn't scrap its nuclear weapons program. British counter-terrorism police are working to establish whether there are any further threats after 3 small bombs were posted to London transport hubs. The parcels were sent to Heathrow and London City airports, as well as Waterloo train station. No one was injured. Carlos Ghosn, the former boss of Nissan, has been released from jail after paying $9 million bail. He was wearing a workman's uniform, blue cap and face mask as he slipped out of the Tokyo detention center. Ghosn was later seen leaving his lawyer's office. He'd been in custody since November on allegations that he understated his income. He denies all charges against him. The United Nations is calling for a full investigation into the excessive use of force against France's Yellow Vest protesters. Demonstrations against President Emmanuel Macron's policies began last November and continued for 16 consecutive weekends. Police are being criticised over their use of non-lethal weapons such as rubber bullets and stun grenades, which cause serious injury.
We encourage the government to continue dialogue, including follow-up to the national discussions which are currently underway, and urge full investigation of all reported cases of excessive use of force.
The UN's also warned that Burkina Faso is facing an unprecedented displacement crisis. It says more than 100,000 people have been forced to flee their homes, 70,000 of them in the past 2 months because of clashes between communities and armed groups. And finally, an insight into the workings of Albert Einstein's mind. A collection of more than 100 pages written by the academic who developed the theory of relativity has been unveiled in Jerusalem. Israel's Hebrew University says it received the papers as a donation from a foundation in Chicago.
A lot has still to be found out about the context and contexts of these pages. So a lot of research will still have to be done. And this in itself opens a new vista, is very exciting.
And that's your international news around the world in 5.
Brilliant. Joyce Harger from our London bureau. Up next on the news at 10 is sports news with Olumide Macaulay.
Hello and welcome to Sports News. African champions, the Super Falcons of Nigeria, earlier this evening beat Thailand women's team 3-0 in a 7th place classification match to wind up their participation at the Cyprus Women's Cup. Ashishat Oshala opened scoring in the 23rd minute through Francesco Odega's assist. Chinaza Uchendu set up Onome Ebi to score the second for Nigeria. Anam Imo made it 3 for Nigeria in the 74th minute, courtesy of an Ashala assist. The tournament is part of the Super Falcons preparation for the World Cup, which will kick off on June the 7th through July the 7th, with the reigning African champions drawn in Group A alongside host France, South Korea, and Norway. And Paris Saint-Germain have Manchester United are through to the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League. The English Premier League side, a few minutes ago, beat PSG 3-1 in the return leg round of 16 to advance 3-all on aggregate. Romelu Lukaku scored 2 goals for United in the first half, and a Marcus Rashford penalty handed them a spot in the last 8. In tonight's other clash, the game between FC Porto and AS Roma is heading to extra time, with the Portuguese side leading the game 2-1, the aggregate scoring leveled at 3-all. A day after knocking out European club champions Real Madrid from the UEFA Champions League, Ajax fans have commended the team, who are back at the Johan Cruyff Arena in Ajax, for their spectacular performance at the Santiago. The fans fancy their side's chances at this season's competition as they chase Europe's biggest club trophy for the first time in 24 years. That's it on Sports News. Thanks for watching. News at 10 continues now.
And the main news again. The appeal court today granted the People's Democratic Party candidate Alhaji Atiku Abubakar leave to examine electoral materials for the 2019 presidential elections. The court, however, turned down the applicant's request to scan and carry out a forensic audit of the electoral materials. Also today, President Muhammadu Buhari promised a decent and credible electoral system for Nigeria. He also urged the youth not to allow themselves to be used as agents of violence. That's how it's been on the news at 10 tonight. On behalf of all of us here, have a splendid night. I'm Gimba Umar. Good night.